What would it take for an entire nation to stop what it was doing and stare at a hole in the ground? On January 30th, 1925, in a rural stretch of Barron County, Kentucky, the answer arrived in the form of a 37-year-old man lying face up in a passage so tight he could not turn his head. His name was Floyd Collins, and for the next 18 days his fate would become the most followed story in American history. He was not a soldier. He was not a president. He was a cave explorer, a self-taught one, at that, who had spent most of his life dropping into the limestone underbelly of south-central Kentucky. The region sat atop one of the most complex cave systems on the planet, a labyrinth carved over tens of millions of years by slow-moving water dissolving the rock from the inside out. Floyd knew these tunnels the way most people know their own neighborhoods. He had mapped corridors that no surveyor had ever touched, crawled through passages that would have made most grown men turn back at the entrance. He was not reckless. He was experienced, which is precisely what makes what happened next so difficult to fully explain. To understand why Floyd was in that cave on January 30th, you have to understand the strange economic fever that had gripped this part of Kentucky in the early 1920s. Cave tourism was a genuine industry. The region already had Mammoth Cave, one of the natural wonders of the continent, drawing visitors from across the country. Entrepreneurs, many of them farmers sitting on unexplored limestone acreage, had caught on. If you could find a cave on your land, particularly one with crystal formations or dramatic chambers, you could charge admission. You could build a business. For a family that had very little, a cave was closer to a lottery ticket than anything else available to them. Floyd Collins had already found one. Crystal Cave on his family's property was genuinely impressive. Stalactites, flowstone formations, chambers large enough to walk through upright. But it had a fatal commercial flaw. It sat miles from the main road, tucked away from the tourist traffic that fed the other operations. Visitors went where access was easy. Floyd's cave attracted almost no one, so Floyd made an arrangement. A neighboring property owner had a connection to the main highway. Floyd would explore Sand Cave, a lesser-known shaft on that land, in hopes of finding a passage that connected to a larger, more commercially viable system. If he found what he was looking for, both men stood to profit. It was a straightforward business arrangement built on genuine geological possibility. On the morning of January 30th, Floyd crawled into Sand Cave alone. The entrance was narrow from the start, a near vertical chimney that required a person to exhale and squeeze. Floyd had been through it before. He knew the layout, a tight descending crawlway, roughly 150 feet long, opening eventually into a broader passage. He carried a kerosene lantern. He moved on his stomach, pushing the lantern ahead of him, pulling himself forward with his elbows against stone that pressed against him from every direction. He made it to the lower section. He found what he believed were promising formations, the kind of geological indicators that suggested a large chamber lay somewhere beyond. He began working his way back out. Somewhere in that return crawl, a rock shifted. It was not a dramatic collapse, no thundering avalanche. A single limestone boulder, later estimated to weigh around 27 pounds, dislodged from the ceiling of the passage and pinned his left ankle against the floor. Floyd tried to pull free. The geometry of the passage worked against him completely. The ceiling was inches from his face. He could not bend at the waist. He could not get leverage. Every attempt to wrench his foot loose drove the stone harder into place. The lantern fell. The light went out. He lay in complete darkness, 55 feet below the surface, in a passage too narrow to roll over in, and he began to shout. No one heard him, not at first. It was the cave owner's son who eventually found Floyd's coat and hat near the entrance and realized something was wrong. His father went in, reached the edge of the squeeze passage, called out. Floyd's voice came back, faint, strained, but alive. He had been trapped for nearly 24 hours by then. Word spread fast through the rural county. Floyd's brother Homer was the first to attempt a rescue. He made the crawl down, reached Floyd, gave him a sandwich and coffee, assessed the situation. The rock was jammed in a position that made it nearly impossible to move without risking a larger collapse. Homer tried chiseling at the surrounding stone to widen the passage. The limestone fractured in ways that alarmed him. The whole corridor was showing stress. He stopped. 46 hours in, no workable solution. Floyd could not turn his body. He could not sleep in any conventional sense. The temperature in the passage hovered just above freezing. Water seeped along the floor beneath him. What happened next was not part of any rescue protocol. It was an accident of American media culture in its most formative decade. A young reporter named William Burke Miller, working for the Louisville Courier-Journal, heard about the situation and decided he would go in, not to help, to report. Miller was small enough to fit the passage and stubborn enough to try. He crawled down to Floyd Collins and conducted an interview in the dark. He wrote it up. His paper ran it. Within 48 hours, the story had moved across the Associated Press wire to hundreds of newspapers across the country. The American public in 1925 had no television. Radio was still a novelty, but they had newspapers, and they read them obsessively. The story of a man trapped underground, alone, in the dark, unable to move, still alive, hit something primal. By the end of the first week, an estimated 10,000 people had gathered in the fields above Sand Cave. Food vendors arrived, souvenir sellers. A country band reportedly set up and played. The Louisville and Nashville Railroad ran special excursion trains to the nearest station. It had become, in the most uncomfortable sense of the word, a spectacle. Miller won the Pulitzer Prize for his reporting. Floyd's story is considered one of the earliest examples of a media event, a moment where the machinery of mass communication transformed a local tragedy into a national obsession. But none of that helped the man at the bottom of the hole. Every rescue attempt failed for a different reason. A pulley system was rigged to haul Floyd out by rope. He screamed that it was pulling him apart, and the effort was abandoned. The weight of the thousands of visitors standing on the ground above was compressing the cave system below. Engineers noted the tunnels were showing signs of stress. On the 12th day, the entry passage collapsed entirely, sealing Floyd off from the surface. No food could reach him. No communication was possible. The rescue team did not know if he was still alive. A new plan was devised. Dig a vertical shaft from above, locate Floyd's position by triangulation, sink a rescue shaft straight down, and tunnel horizontally to reach him. It was the kind of engineering problem that sounds simple and is, in practice, deeply complicated. Every shovelful of earth removed had to be brought back up. The shaft had to be reinforced as it went. The angle of the connecting tunnel had to be precise. Workers estimated it would take 30 hours to complete. It took more than 140. During this period, engineers had rigged a light bulb down through a gap to keep Floyd's location warm. An amplifier connected to the circuit detected fluctuations that corresponded to breathing. They used this as a crude vital signs monitor. As long as the signal flickered, Floyd was alive. Then, on the 15th day, the bulb stopped working. The signal went silent. They kept digging.
On the 18th day, February 16, 1925, the rescue shaft reached Floyd Collins. Homer climbed down. What he found confirmed what the silence had already suggested. Floyd had died, most likely within the first few days after the passage collapsed. The exact time of death was never precisely established. He had been underground for more than 18 days. The limestone boulder that ended his life weighed 27 pounds. For context, that is roughly the weight of a car tire. In open space, on flat ground, a person could kick it aside without much effort. In that 9-inch crawlway, it was immovable. The passage geometry had turned a minor rockfall into an inescapable trap. The aftermath unfolded with a strange, uncomfortable logic. Floyd's body was actually left in Sand Cave for several months. The tunnel was too unstable to safely retrieve him. When he was eventually recovered and buried, the story did not end there.